Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to break down the 10 laws of elk hunting. Not tips, not opinions, laws. Now, there is no always or never in elk hunting, but these are the things that have held true for me no matter where I've hunted, how long I've been doing it, or how much effort I've put in. And whether you realize it or not, every elk hunt you've ever had has been shaped by these laws. The problem is a lot of elk hunters don't recognize them until it's too late. They think elk hunting is random. They think success comes down to luck, effort, or finding the right tactic. I don't believe it does. Elk hunting is predictable, but only if you understand what actually controls elk behavior. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through what I believe are 10 of the laws that govern how elk live, move, and survive. And if you start paying attention to these, everything about your elk hunting will start to make more sense. Law number 1, elk live where hunters struggle. One of the first realities you need to accept in elk hunting is this: elk are not where it's easy. They are where it's hard. Distance, elevation, steep terrain, deadfall, thick timber, those aren't obstacles to elk. They're filters. And what they filter out is human pressure. Most elk hunters hunt where they can, not where they should. Close to roads, easier hikes, cleaner terrain. And because of that, those areas get hit over and over again. And elk respond exactly how you'd expect. They leave, or they become inconsistent, unpredictable, and difficult to hunt. Elk don't prioritize convenience, they prioritize survival. And survival means getting into places where they feel secure, places a lot of elk hunters either won't go or won't go consistently. And that's why you'll hear people say, there just aren't elk in here. There probably are. You're just not far enough, high enough, or deep enough to be where they want to be. And this is the line you need to understand. Elk don't avoid hunters by accident. They avoid where hunters can easily go. If you want more consistent elk encounters, you have to be willing to go where fewer people are willing to go. Law number 2, the wind rules the mountain. If there's one thing that controls elk hunting more than anything else, it's the wind. Not your calling, not your gear, not how hard you hunt, the wind. You can do everything else right. Be in the right area, find elk, set up perfectly, and if the wind isn't right, none of it matters because elk survive with their nose. And the biggest mistake elk hunters make is thinking wind is simple, that it just goes uphill in the morning and downhill in the evening, when in reality, thermals are influenced by terrain, shade, sun exposure, and shifting air currents. They swirl, they stall, and they change faster than a lot of elk hunters can keep up with. And that's where hunts fall apart. Not when you see elk, not when you make a move. Before that, the moment you commit to a setup without understanding what the wind is going to do next, the outcome is already decided. That's why experienced elk hunters spend more time thinking about wind than anything else, because this is the reality. If the wind is wrong, the hunt is already over. And if you don't respect that, elk are going to teach it to you the hard way. Law number 3, find the cows, find the bulls. Most elk hunters say they're hunting bulls, but what they're really doing is looking for a specific animal without understanding what controls its movement. Bulls don't exist in a vacuum. For most of the season, they're tied to the cows. Whether it's early season patterns, pre-rut grouping, or full rut behavior, cows dictate where bulls spend their time. They influence movement, location, and daily patterns more than anything else. So when you ignore cows, you're cutting your odds down immediately. If you find cows, you've found the center of activity. You found the reason bulls are there or nearby or will be there. That dramatically increases your chances of an encounter. The mistake a lot of elk hunters make is adopting a solo bull mindset. They're chasing sign, looking for tracks, or trying to locate an individual bull without understanding the bigger picture. And sometimes those bulls can be in solo or in bachelor groups later in the year. But a lot of times what you'll find if you think back on your encounters or you notice them in the future is that they're at the same elevation bands, feeding in the same type of feed and terrain as the cows that might be a quarter to a half mile away. So still finding the cows to find the bulls is the bigger picture here. But that's why a lot of hunters struggle to find consistency because they're hunting the result, not the cause. The reality is simple. You're not hunting bulls, you're hunting where bulls need to be. And more often than not, that starts with cows. On number 4, terrain controls elk movement. Elk don't just wander through the mountains. Their movement is shaped by terrain like benches, saddles, side hills, edges. Those features aren't random. They dictate how elk travel because they offer efficiency, visibility, and security. Elk are constantly balancing energy conservation with safety, and terrain is what allows them to do both. A bench, for example, lets elk move laterally without gaining or losing elevation. It's efficient. A saddle creates a natural crossing point. Edges give them quick access between feed and cover. Those are not just good-looking spots, they're repeatable movement features for elk. And that's where predictability comes from. A lot of elk hunters struggle because they think elk movement is random. They see tracks one place, elk another, and assume it's inconsistent. It's not. They're just not seeing the structure behind it. Once you understand how terrain funnels movement, you're going to stop guessing so much. You're going to start identifying where elk are most likely to travel, not just where they've been. And that changes everything about how you position yourself. Because the truth is simple. Elk movement isn't random. It's restricted. And when you learn to read that restriction, you can start turning uncertainty into opportunity. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post-Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory, it's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. Law number 5, security beats food every time. One of the fastest ways to misunderstand elk is to think they prioritize food above everything else. In my opinion, they don't. They prioritize safety and security. Food matters, no question, absolutely. But the moment elk feel exposed, pressured, or vulnerable, they're going to leave a good food source without hesitation. It doesn't matter how green it is, how fresh it looks, or how much sign you're seeing. If it doesn't feel safe, they're not going to stay. And that's why you'll see elk feeding in open areas at night, then disappear into thick, nasty cover during the day. And when pressure increases, more hunters or more movement or more disturbance, they shift even deeper into terrain that's harder to access. Steep ground, deadfall, dark timber, places most elk hunters avoid or won't push into consistently. That's where elk hold. This is also why so many elk hunters struggle. They find great feeds, see great sign, and expect elk to just be there during hunting hours. But they're not, because security always wins. And this is the line you have to understand. Elk will risk hunger before they risk exposure. If you want consistent encounters, stop hunting where elk like to eat and start hunting where they feel safe. Law number 6, elk survive by their nose. If you take one thing seriously in elk hunting, it should be this. Elk survive by their nose. Their vision matters, their hearing matters, but nothing comes close to their sense of smell. And that's their primary defense, and that's what keeps them alive. That's why downwind checks are not occasional, they're constant. Any mature bull that hears something, sees something, or even thinks something isn't right, he's going to use the wind to then confirm it. He doesn't have to rush in. He doesn't have to expose himself. He just has to get your scent. And the second that happens, it's over. Not maybe, not sometimes, over. That's what makes scent control and wind discipline so critical. You're not trying to trick elk with what they see, you're trying to avoid being detected by what they smell. And most elk hunters lose elk before they ever realize it. They think the elk disappeared, they think the setup didn't work. In reality, the elk got their wind long before the encounter ever developed. And that's why this law matters. You don't beat elk by what they see, you lose them by what they smell. Law number 7. Thermals expose careless hunters. Understanding wind direction is one thing. Understanding how it changes over time is something completely different. That's where thermals come in. This is where a lot of elk hunters get exposed. In the morning, thermals generally rise after the sun has warmed the ground. Before that, they're still falling. In the evening, they generally fall as temperatures drop. That's the basic idea. But in real terrain, it's rarely that clean. And midday is where a lot of things really get dangerous. You get swirl zones, cross currents, air that doesn't commit in one direction. Add in shade, sun exposure, and complex terrain, and now you've got wind doing things a lot of elk hunters aren't paying attention to. And that's the problem. Most elk hunters think about wind once when they set up, but thermals are constantly changing. What was safe 30 minutes ago might not be safe now. That's when elk win because they don't have to guess. They just wait for your scent to show up. That's why so many encounters fall apart late in the setup or right before the shot. Not because of movement, not because of noise, but because the wind shifted. And this is the reality. Thermals don't forgive mistakes, they reveal them. If you're not thinking ahead of what the wind is about to do, you're already behind. Law number 8. Bulls circle downwind. This one is probably a little bit more of the most controversial one out of the list. I'll have guys saying, well, I see bulls come in on a straight line, they never circle. All right. For me, this is one of the most consistent behaviors I see in elk hunting and one of the misunderstood. You might see a bull that you think is coming straight in, but a lot of times I would be really surprised if he hasn't circled at some point. A lot of times when we're calling, bulls will circle downwind to try to confirm. Not sometimes, not occasionally, but consistently, especially in our pressured units. When a bull hears something he's unsure about, another bull, a cow, movement, he doesn't just walk straight in most of the time. He uses the wind to verify what he's dealing with, and that means he's going to try to get downwind of the sound before he commits. And in pressured elk, this behavior becomes even more pronounced. They've been called to before, they've been hunted, they've learned that walking straight into a situation can get them killed. So instead, they slow down, they circle, and they use their nose to confirm everything. This is where a lot of encounters fall apart. Elk hunters set up thinking the elk is going to come in directly. They focus on the front approach and ignore what's happening downwind. And by the time the bull makes his move, it's too late. He's already got your scent and the encounter is over before you even see him. That's why this law matters. If you don't account for downwind, you're not just making a mistake, you're planning to fail when you set up. Law number 9. Move slower than you want to. One of the hardest adjustments in elk hunting is slowing down. Everything in you wants to move faster. That fear of missing out. Cover more ground. Get to the next ridge, the next basin, the next setup. It feels like progress, but a lot of times it's the opposite. Hunters move too fast. They hike through good areas instead of actually hunting them. They make noise without realizing it. They'd expose themselves in openings, skyline themselves on ridges, and miss elk that are already close because elk don't need much, right? A small sound, a flicker of movement, a silhouette that doesn't look right. That's all it takes. And the faster you move, the more of those mistakes you stack up. Slowing down changes everything. You start seeing more, you start hearing more, you start noticing sign, terrain features, and subtle movement that you would have walked right past. And more importantly, you give yourself time to react when something happens because elk encounters are rarely planned. They happen when you're in the right place and moving with control. And this is the reality. Elk hunting rewards control, not speed. The hunters who consistently find elk aren't the ones covering the most ground, they're the ones hunting the ground they're in. And law number 10, consistent hunters read the situation. If there's one thing that separates average elk hunters from the consistent killers, it's this. They read the situation. They don't rely on a single tactic. They don't go into a hunt thinking, I'm going to bugle or I'm going to sit this spot no matter what, because no tactic works all the time. Conditions change constantly. Wind shifts, pressure builds, elk move. What worked yesterday might not work today, and what worked this morning might not work this afternoon. That's the reality. And the hunters who consistently find success are the ones who adjust. They're paying attention to wind, terrain, and how elk are behaving in that moment. They're not forcing a plan. They're making decisions based on what's actually happening in front of them, then applying the right tool for that situation. That's where most elk hunters struggle. They try to stick to what they want to do instead of adapting to what they should do, and elk expose that. Now, when you start hunting this way, everything is going to become clearer, faster, and more effective, because these aren't just tips and they aren't just opinions. These are hard-earned and learned constraints of elk hunting. There is no always or never in elk hunting, but these have been true for me personally over and over. And they exist whether you recognize them or not. Every success, every failure, every blown opportunity, it all traces back to one or more of these laws being followed or broken. That's the difference. A lot of elk hunters try to do more miles, more calling, more effort, more tactics. They think if they just push harder, something will eventually work. But elk hunting doesn't always reward more, but it does often reward precision. It rewards discipline and patience. It rewards understanding what actually matters and eliminating the mistakes that cost you opportunities. That's the shift. You don't succeed by doing more all the time. You succeed by breaking fewer of these laws. And when you start hunting that way, everything is going to become more simple and a whole lot more consistent for you. Now, if you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. If you want hands-on application and real-time breakdowns, we have an in-person Elk Camp 2026 this summer that is built around this same philosophy: structure, preparation, and execution in real time. You can check out our Elk Camp at backboneunlimited.com. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is never a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all of you. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle. Step into the backcountry and step up your elk hunting game at Elk Camp 2026. This isn't a seminar. It's an immersive experience with real field training alongside successful elk hunters Matt and Saxton Hartsky. You'll learn how elk think and move, break down terrain like a pro, call with confidence, and practice 3 days of real-world elk hunting scenarios that mirror what you'll face on your own hunt. This camp was built to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be in the mountains. With limited spots and hands-on coaching, you'll walk away sharper, more prepared, and ready to hunt with purpose and confidence. Elk Camp 2026. Sharpen your edge. Register now and prepare for the season like never before at backboneunlimited.com.